So we'll continue with our subtractive synthesis exploration. This time for activity 2 we are creating a subtractive drum synth. So in addition, as it says here, to regular pitch-based synthesizers, we can also make a drum machine out of subtractive synthesis. Now this is going to be fairly rudimentary, but it will demonstrate some critical ideas that will be useful to you. So we'll go into Ableton. I'm just going to move this so that we can see the instructions when we need to. I'm going to make a new Max instrument as we normally do and enter that, so Max should open. And then we'll follow the instructions that we've got here. So let's get rid of that. This time we've got a new oscillator, which is a noise oscillator. So that just produces some noise. Then we're going to use two new objects which you haven't come across yet. So that is function and line. And what we need to do is to connect the second outlet of this function object to the first inlet of the line object. I'm not going to say too much about why that is, but it's important that you do connect it to the second outlet of this function object, because otherwise it won't behave in the way that you want it to. So what we're going to do with this function object is to create an envelope, and that's quite easy to do. What we need to do is to lock the patch, and then as soon as we do so, anytime we click within this space, we will create what's called a breakpoint. So this is a breakpoint function editor, hence function, and every time we click a point, then we get a new point in our function table. So I'm going to make what is a fairly simple envelope, which would have a decay that an attack that's relatively quick, then a decay that's very broadly kind of exponential in quality, so it goes down quickly and then gets shallower as it goes on. And just as we've been using before, we're going to use I need to unlock the patch again. We need to use a multiplication tilde object to multiply the output from our oscillator to that of our amplitude or envelope generation. So we connect those together, and broadly speaking that is what we have. So I need to make, as always, my live gain object and connect to both of those. Incidentally, if you're wondering how it is that I can connect the outlet of one thing to the inlet of multiple other things, I'll delete this so that I can show you. If you click on, if you go into options and choose segmented patch cords, then you click on the outlet and then press the shift key, then every time you click an inlet on another object or several other objects, then you you have another kind of sticky line, and then you release the shift key when you know it's the last one you're going to connect, and that will give you your additional points of contact. So again, I'm going to make actually I've got my plug out object already here, so let's bring that down and connect that up. So the only other thing we need to do, because this noise object is always sounding, so all I need to do is to trigger this envelope in order to have it produce that envelope. And to do that I need what's called a button object, and this produces a message called a bang. So what this sends through is a kind of trigger that's called a bang, and that will trigger this envelope, and then we should hear it work. So I lock the patch again, and there we go. So depending on the kind of shape that I make in the breakpoint function editor, we'll get a different kind of quality of output. And already perhaps you can tell that we can make a percussive quality So we've got here a very quick attack with a slow decay. Now that's maybe a bit slower than I actually want, so I'm going to make that a little bit quicker. That's maybe a little bit too quick. Anyway, you get the idea. You can fiddle around with this until it's of a shape that you think is suitable. And that's your basic model for this kind of percussion sound. The problem is, though, that it's a little bit dull. It sounds like noise. So what we might want to do is to filter that noise in order to make it a bit more like a particular character of percussion instrument. So I'm going to use an SVF object which we encountered a few weeks ago. So that goes there. And I'm going to put it in between this noise object and the multiplication object. And just as before, we can use some number boxes. So this is a floating point number box. Connect those. By the way, if you're wondering, I'm using quick keys on the keyboard in order to generate these various objects. You might already know that the N object produce is a new normal object. An M object produces a message box, so M for mother produces message. And if I press an F, then that produces a floating point number box, or a flow num. So I'm going to connect those up. Actually, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger to make it a bit neater. Still not very neat, but that'll do. And if we hover our cursor over the inlets of the SVF object, we can see what each of those does now. So we've got the cutoff frequency and we've got the resonance. So I could just put that in as a comment so that we know what those do. And what we have, we've connected the outlet of the SVF object to the low pass filter output. So you might gather or guess that I'm going to attempt to make some kind of a bass drum sound. So if I lock the patch now and I change this cutoff frequency to, it can be quite a low frequency, so I shall put in 150. You may not hear that if you're listening over your computer speakers, but if you've got headphones on, you should hear that. And I'm going to put the resonance to 0.5. So the resonance values on this object can go between 0 and 1. I'm going to put it to halfway. And now when I click this button, we get quite a low frequency thump. And once again, I could finesse these values in order to make that more refined. So we've got, we've basically got a bass drum sound now. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use what's called a preset object so that I can save these values, because if I were now to close this max window, we would lose, these would basically go down to 0 and we wouldn't, they wouldn't be saved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this preset object. Oops, there we go. And what the preset object does is basically to save the state of anything that you connect to it. So if I now connect the first outlet to the first inlet of all of the objects that I want to be saved within that preset, I'm using the Shift key to connect multiple lines again. Okay, so I'm basically going to try and save the state of the cutoff frequency, the resonance frequency, and the shape of my filter, or sorry, the shape of my envelope. And if I lock the patch again, now I can press the Shift key, hover over one of those nodules, and click it, and that saves the state, which is rather good, except that you can't really see it working at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the values in here. So I'm going to put in a cutoff frequency of 300 and a resonance of 0.7. And I'm going to change, well actually I'll leave it as it is for the time being. and I'm going to save the state of that. And then I'm going to do a bit of a wobble so that we get a kind of thrumming bass drum sound, and I'm going to save the state of that. Okay, so remember that I had to press the Shift key whenever I press one of these nodules in order to save it. When I want to recall a preset, then I don't need to press the Shift key. So now I'm not pressing the Shift key, I'm going to press the first one of these, and you'll see that it pops back to the original state that we had. And then the second one brings up the second state, and then the third one brings up the third state where I changed the shape of the envelope. And of course, you know, for all of those, we now have a different character. So that's rather helpful. We now have a way of saving the state of all of those things. And as yeah, once again, we can do more stuff that's interesting. I'm going to get rid of this because we're not using it. And I'm going to, we've basically done what Callum's asked us to do now. So I'm going to make this a bit bigger. I'm going to move that to the side. Now there's two things that we're missing at the moment. One is variety. So we only have the one bass drum sound, and maybe we want to have some other percussion sounds as well. And the second thing is we've got no way of triggering this from within Ableton. Okay, so the only way that I can trigger this is by clicking this this button object, which works okay. But if I want to connect it to any kind of MIDI playback in Ableton, then I can't yet do that. So let's deal with the first one first, which is to give us some other sounds. Well, all we need to do for that is to take the main part of our engine, which is this bit, and duplicate it. And the way I'm going to duplicate it is to select all the bits that I want, and then press the Alt key, and then drag. So it's very much the same as you would do in any kind of word processor. If you want to copy things, is to press Alt. It'll be different on a PC, by the way, I suspect. Actually, no, I think Alt is the same on a PC. But anyway, we've got our duplication here. And notice all of our values have been kind of wiped. The preset, by the way, I don't want to use anymore, because if I want to use one, I need to remake it, because otherwise it's referring to what's over here. So I'm getting rid of that for now. So let's say I want to make a snare drum sound now. Well, first of all, I need to connect this multiplication object back into our overall gain. So I've now done that. And the second thing I'll probably want to do is not to have it as a low frequency cutoff, low pass filter. I'm going to go instead for a high pass filter, because the snare drum encompasses sort of higher frequency content. But otherwise, our model is basically exactly the same. So if I now lock the patch, and then go to the cutoff frequency, this time I'm going to go for, I don't know, 600 maybe, and a resonance of, well, I'll go for 0.5 for now, and we'll see how that sounds. It's a little bit high frequency, so let's go a little bit further down, so 400 Hertz. Somewhere in the middle. That'll do for now. Okay, so we've got something in the middle in terms of the cutoff frequency, or the center frequency, and then the resonance we could maybe increase a little bit as well. So we'll make that maybe. So we add a bit of pitch with that. So we've got a snare drum sound, and once again we could duplicate that. So copy it all, just drag it across. Unfortunately now, of course, I've lost my live gain, so now I can just about see it. So once again, I'm going to connect that up and change my cutoff resonance to, I don't know, 2000. And I'm going to make quite a high resonant frequency this time and hope that I don't blow anybody's ears off. But if I have a resonance of 2, let's see what we get now. Maybe we could go even higher with our resonance. Why hasn't that worked? Oh, I know why. Because I want to, let's take it into our bandpass output instead. So, okay, let's bring our resonance up more. That's interesting, it's not particularly pitchy yet, is it? What have I done wrong? Maybe I've just taken it too high. Ah, there you go. So maybe it doesn't work above 1, or maybe it did something a bit crazy. Anyway, you notice that if I take it to a resonance of 1, we've got high resonance, so it's basically feeding back on itself at the pitch of 2000 Hertz. And we get this rather nice plink sound. So I'm gonna go down a little bit from that because I quite like having a little bit of noise in there. And we could maybe make that the envelope a little shorter. So we've got what could almost be some kind of well, resonant pitched object there. So we've got 3 instruments basically. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that we can see it. So we've got a bass drum sound or something akin to it. I think I prefer this one. Then we've got a snare, and then we've got I don't know, it's not a cowbell, it's something, maybe a wood block. And the one thing that we don't yet have is a way of saving these. Now we could use a preset object again, but actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a load bang object and a message box. So let's say I want 550 Hertz for this one, and I want 0.8 as my resonance for that, and I'll do the same thing over here. Whoops, 2000 and 0.97. Okay, so that means that every time I reopen the patch, these will those values will always be in these number boxes. I can't change them like I can with the preset, but let's say that I don't want to. So there you go. That deals with our variety issue. And then one further thing I said was that we can't activate this from within Ableton. So in a normal kind of sampler or a percussion synth, you would expect that there would be certain notes on your keyboard that would trigger certain instruments. So your bass drum may be C1, so the C somewhere below middle C, and then C sharp would be another instrument, D is usually your snare, and then you've got other notes which will trigger other instruments. So that's what we're going to attempt to do here, and that's quite simple to achieve. So what we can do is I've just selected everything by pressing Command All or Command A. I'm going to move that down, and I'm going to make a note in. So this will be familiar to you from what we've used before, and I'm going to use a strip note. So what this is doing is it means basically that I will only get a value from note in. It will only recognise when I hit a note, not when I release it. So it won't send any note off information. And then I can use what's called a select object, and this will allow me to select a particular value that comes in from as a MIDI note and then do something with it. So if I write in select and then a space, and then whatever note I want to be recognised. So let's say that I want middle C to be attached to the bass drum sound. I want the note D to be attached to the snare sound, and I want the note E to be attached to this wood block. So I know that the note middle C is a 60. We've talked about that in previous classes, so hopefully that's now becoming familiar to you. Then we need to count up from that 2 semitones. So to go up 1 semitone would take us to C sharp, that would be 61, and then another semitone would take us to 62, which is D, so we'll put in a 62 there. And then I said that E would be for the wood block, so that would be, well, 63 would be D sharp, and 64 would be E. There you go. So when I do that, the select object spawns some outputs. So and each output, if you look at this, it says bang if it input matches 60. So if it gets an input that is the note 60 or the number 60, then it will send something out of this outlet. Then if it gets 62, it'll send something out of this outlet, and 64, it'll send something out of this outlet, which is exactly what I want, because all I need to do is to connect this up so that it's got the input from the from when I hit the key, and then I can connect the 60, the output from the 60 to this button. So that will trigger my bass drum just as I wanted. This when I get the input as 62, it will send a bang out of this outlet. So when it gets a D, that's when you'll have a response from there. Connect that to that button, and so on. And that's it. So now, assuming this track is active, which it is, if I hit the note middle C, which I'm doing at the moment, then I get the bass drum sound. Nothing happens if I press C sharp, but if I hit D, I get the snare drum. If I hit E, I get the wood block sound. So we have the things that we have the behavior that we want. And that's it. So you could continue to add more sounds. You could explore the different kinds of outputs from the SVF object, whether it's the low pass, high pass, band pass, or notch, just by connecting outputs to there and fiddling around with the cutoff and resonance of these. And then you can save those by either using this kind of load bang, so that you whenever the patch loads or whenever the instrument loads, that number is going to each of these number boxes, or you can use the preset. And that's basically it. And then of course, yeah, you can make more instruments. So you can make 8 of these in order to have an instrument on every note of this scale, the diatonic scale, for example. I'm just going to check Callum's notes, but I think that's probably it. Yeah, that's basically what he put there. So I hope that's helped, and try building your own.